So we are oh, great. Okay. So we're going to use our imaginations a little bit. Don't worry if you think you're not an imaginative person. I'm going to get to that. We're human beings. We have an imagination, and we're going to reconnect with our values. So what are those anchors that are truly important to us? And recalling that together. And we've already talked a little bit about this, but I'm going to be coming from a Latin American liberation praxis lens. So if you see words like oppression and liberation, it's coming from that perspective. And if you're interested in that, I'd be happy to speak more about that offline. But in addition to institutional betrayal, we know that our institutions are not perfect. In all of our institutions, no matter what the idealized words we use, are situated within societies that have many systems of oppression at work. And so it should not surprise us that higher education also is the site of many different kinds of oppression: white supremacy culture, sexism, classism, ableism, homophobia, xenophobia, and many others. And I have found it helpful to recognize that, yes, all these things are at work, but it should not be surprising to us because of the history. And now I'm just speaking of the United States. The history of higher education in the United States is rooted in all these kinds of oppression. So, of course, it would be showing up in some way at our institutions. And somehow that just reading that reality uh, helps me remember and expect it rather than be surprised by it and internalize it as it's a problem with me. And so when we talk about liberation, then we're talking about critical hope and the fact that once you read the system for what it is, then we can resist it more intentionally, and we could co-create un otro mundo posible, which is another possible world, something different. And we may not know what that different is, but there are many different possibilities than the one that we are currently living in. And that we can do that for ourselves. We can do that with our colleagues, our students, and then for the greater good. So having that orientation then means that we need to figure out or reconnect again with what is, like, who am I? What's the kind of person I want to be to do this work of liberation in these systems or outside of these systems? And so it can be healing and liberating to reconnect with your whole self. We're going to talk about values here. Some of the other webinars that are coming up offer different ways of reconnecting with self through different modalities, focus on the body, focus on the mind, spirit. So we need all of that. We would need to remember who we are so we can make healing choices for ourselves and we don't get lost, which oppressive systems are designed to make us feel lost and just to conform. And so we're working against that. So we need the strength and the fortitude so that we can continue liberation for ourselves, but that we can also stand in solidarity with others who are experiencing different forms of oppression and then change the system to create that other possible world. So with that in mind, values are the things that point us, they serve as a compass and they point us in the right direction. So no matter what the storm is that we find ourselves in, whether could be anti-DEI legislation, it could be institutional betrayal that's specific to a particular institution, Title IX violations, whatever it happens to be, we know where we're headed because we know what's important for us. And then we have the energy to co-create something better. So values, sometimes people get stuck on values. So I just want to kind of briefly say values capture what's meaningful to you and they drive your work. So if I were to write, I empower others to embrace and own their gifts, my value there is that I like to um, lift other people up, but not as if I'm in control of that, but like enable people to embrace their human dignity and their whole self and to feel um, ownership and grace and gift in that. And that value I can live no matter where I am, who I'm with. As a parent, a wife, a sister, madrina, as a dean, a professor, a coach, that value is something I can do anywhere. And I can live that value across time. So, now, 10 years from now, that value remains somewhat stable for me. So it's not dictating specific outcomes, but it helps me make decisions. And so I invite you to, if as you're thinking about this, there might be one or two values that stick out for you as being really important to you. And don't worry if you don't know the words yet, because that takes time also. But if you have one in there, you want to put a value in the chat, that might help others too start to think about their values or have words for their values. So do that while I'm going to keep moving on. And when we clarify our values, it frees us from things that oppress us, and it frees us to move forward in a variety of different ways. And these are just a couple of examples. It frees me up from feeling by myself and isolated or demoralized. And it frees me up to say yes and no, and to ask questions and to persist and to work for systemic change. So values are liberating. When we think of, or clarifying our values is liberating. So this is where we come to our imagination. Sometimes when I work with academics, or like, especially if you work in disciplines that are very focused on words or equations, and so STEM and humanities have that in common, where there's this idea of like, I like this structured linear way of thinking. My imagination is not accessible. I will say that we all have the capacity for imagination. It might look different. It might manifest itself differently. But sometimes when we're in oppressive environments, we feel like there is no way out. And that's what oppression is designed to do, is to short circuit our imagination so we can't create that other possible world. So this is why we're going to work on values, and we're going to use our imagination to do that. So are we ready to try something? Okay. All right. And I'm keeping track of time so that we give you a taste. And this is something that you can also take with you into the future. Okay. I want you to think about your retirement party. You're going to have a retirement party. If you don't like that idea and you don't like the idea of retirement, or that brings up anxiety for you, you can think about instead a going away party. You're going to go on some world travel for like 5 years, and you're not going to come back to see people for a while. Okay, so either a retirement party or a going away party. And I'd like you to imagine where you're going to have this party. Pick a favorite place, not what other people want. Where do you want to have your party? The beach? The mountains? A fancy restaurant? Like wherever it happens to be. So take a moment to think about where that place is going to be, what time of year. Is it in the morning, the evening? Like what? Just think about those, like setting the stage for yourself. And you get to invite your guests. You're not going to have anyone there that you don't want to be there. So who are you going to invite? And maybe for our time today, maybe just think about 5 people you're going to invite. And again, these are not people that you feel like you should invite. These are people that you actually want to invite. Okay. consider some tips if you're not sure, like, I don't know, like, who do I invite? Maybe people from different parts of your life. Could be some people that you know from work, could be family members, community members. Um, think about people with different positional authority than you. So maybe some peers or colleagues, maybe some people who've reported to you or that you supervised, and also people that maybe you reported to. Again, restricting it to only the people that you want there. And then consider people with different lived experiences and identities than yours. So take a moment and, 5 people. If you come up with more, that's great too. Who do you want to invite? Who do you want to see at this party? All right. And even if you just got maybe 2 people down, that's fine, because the next part is a little bit harder. So, what do you want your guests to say about you, about how they appreciated you? And not collectively, what do they all say collectively? But imagine each person's going to step up and toast to you. And they are, imagine what you want them to say about how they appreciate you or your work or just your presence. You might start wondering what they would actually say. Like at this moment, I want you to don't go there. This is what you want them to say about you. So they're not going to see you for a while. You're either retiring or you're going away for a while. And this is their chance to say what they've appreciated about you in knowing you. So for each person, jot down a couple of notes of what you want them to say about how they appreciated you.
But Annmarie, I invited the dog.
Ah, you can invite your pets too. And you can also invite people who are no longer on this side of life. So if there's, some be expansive. And it could be your pup, your cat, a grandparent, an ancestor that you never met. What do you want them to say? And as you're doing this, I'll give you a couple more minutes to just kind of walk through this. If you feel so inclined, I see a lot of great values in the chat. If you feel so inclined to share anything about this experience, whether it's an obstacle or difficulty or a challenge or something new or just something you want to say or share in the chat, please feel free. right. So again, this is something that you can continue beyond this afternoon, because it does take time. You may find that there are additional people that you want to add to your list, or entities, or beings on your list. And I encourage you to return to this over time. It's not the kind of thing that in one setting, everything will become clear. But an exercise like this helps us reconnect with what is important to me at this moment. And it can bring up emotions, as some have mentioned in the chat too, and like conflict and dissonance of, I would have invited this person before and now I can't. And actually, my pool of people that I would invite is much smaller than it might have been a week ago or last year. Um, and so there will be feelings that also help you, that you may not have been in touch with, that may need some healing of their own, and can also help you realize, and this is why I value community, or this is why I value, so like community is my value, authentic community, not pseudo relational community. People who stick through things, or was it through thick or thin? Or it could be freedom and liberation is a value for me. And yet I'm living in a place that is not allowing me to experience that. Um, so it can bring up a lot of things, and it also brings up, what are those values that that may have been squashed or devalued, or that whatever they may be, the ones that I need to recapture to be able to continue in my healing journey. So, oh, we did this. We did a little bit of reflection. And as you are taking notes about what you want people to say, you will see value words come up and pop up in those different statements that can be part of your collection of, this is my compass. These are the things that really mean a lot to me. And these are the values that can guide me into the future and be part of my healing practice. So pay attention to those words too when you're kind of coming up with what you want people to say. Those are your values. Those are your values. There's additional ways to get in touch with your values, including self-reflection, but also sometimes we have a hard time coming up with words, and we can ask people. I remember asking my sister once, like, what lights me up? Like, what do you think I'm excited about? Because I got so disconnected from my own experience. Like I needed someone else to reflect it back to me. And she's one of my fiercest cheerleaders. And so I just said, like, what is it? What are the things that you see in me? And that helped me reconnect. So sometimes we need the help of others. And sometimes working and listening in solidarity with others helps us remember, yes, that's my value too. And which is another reason why we need community in there as well. If there are other practices that you have found that help you connect with your values, I encourage you to enter those into the chat. And I see that there's I haven't been able to monitor the chat while I'm doing this exercise. So I don't mean to, like, I hope no one thinks I'm ignoring what you're writing in the chat, but I see that people are interacting with you all, and I'm really pleased to see that. And I'm so glad that you feel comfortable using the chat to share your experiences. So thank you for doing that as well. So I hope that this practice is helpful to you in being able to think about, like, reconnect again with the values. Because remember that that's one way, that's part of the path of liberation, is reconnecting with ourselves this is just one way to do that. Um, and because I love accountability uh, exercises if I'm able to. If there's one thing that you can commit to in the next week to continue to articulate your values and clarify what those values are, I encourage you to jot that down right now in your maybe in your planner. If you want to put it in the chat, some kind of commitment or something that you are going to take a step to do. And it could be, I'm going to set aside 15 minutes tomorrow to go through this exercise again, or maybe do something else that helps you reconnect with your values. I encourage you to put that in the chat too, of like, hey, I'm publicly committing to doing this thing. Feel free to do that if that's helpful. And then finally, I just wanted to say, like, I love building community for some of the reasons we all have talked about here. And I'm on LinkedIn if you want to connect with me, and like we can connect there. I mentioned that I have a book, which someone taught, I think it was Jenna talked about revenge writing. Um, Writing this book on how we can lead in higher education that like is toward liberation, for me, was a healing practice of transforming the hurt into something that can be useful and healing for other people. So I'm very excited that this labor of love will come out. I don't know what the timeline is yet, but it's on its way. It's in press officially. Um, but I mean, it's not a plug to buy the book, but just to let you know, like you can do these kinds of things as an act of healing. So I thank you very much for participating today, and I'll turn it back to Serena.